Hey, Honeys and Hunks is a new episode this week. Sorry for jumping the gun if y'all were ready last week with that, but us HCH crew, we got a whole fresh episode as the summer winds down. Makes me a little bit sad coming in Minnesota, but so we got the season done, playoffs and championships won, off season has arrived, and it's kind of died down. Jade, are you using this time to reset from basketball, or is that just making you itch even more for it?
No, honestly, what's happening is Patrick and I are making sure we have 2 viewing areas set up because he's really into football and preseason football has already started.
Yes.
He's like, football's on. I'm like, listen, I'm going to give football a go, but like, it's going to take me time. And I'm like, and I did not watch enough basketball last season. So I will be focusing on basketball. Football will be like a side dish.
It's something that's going to maybe get a sports appetite there, but it's not going to feed you really.
Right.
So, Shay, with this lull of basketball, has this been able to help you catch up some things? I know you have some big things with NPR right now.
Yeah, I am recording something with NPR tomorrow. I was on WNYC yesterday. And I'm also just like writing and I'm getting married in 9 weeks. So I'm like trying to figure that out too.
Wow. So you got everything going on and then some right now.
Yeah. Sleep is my favorite thing because I get to rest. Yeah, because it's like I'm like going. And then
right.
Sleep is great. What do you mean?
I've never heard of it.
Who needs sleep?
So, on this week's episode, if you saw the tweet that was sent out twice, we're going to be discussing the Netflix documentary, The Untold Malice at the Palace. We're going back to the original content again, which is fun for you guys because you don't know what's going to come at. For me, it is tough. But so we're going to be talking about the players that were at the center of it all, the lead up to the brawl, the actual brawl itself with the repercussions, the league's response and the media's response, and just a ripple effect that's come to the game to even today right now. So, but before we start off today, don't forget to follow us on social media. We got Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Hardcourt Honeys, and at Twitter at HC Honeys. Don't forget to follow our own stuff, Jade at Auxiliary Things, Shay watches NBA, and TJ Rebound. Shay also got a couple other ones, so follow her on those ones too. Let's help her out with many different ways. Shameless plug. Okay, so first things first. One thing that I noticed going into the documentary, one of the things that was first was Jermaine O'Neal is an executive producer of the documentary itself.
Ooh, that's a good catch.
So how much more of a bias does this going into the documentary itself, having Jermaine O'Neal being an executive producer, Jade?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always kind of the opinion with documentaries is like, don't think because it's a documentary it doesn't have an angle. It probably still does. It's still made by people that have biases. So it's going to be there unless it's like a debate documentary where they're really bringing in both sides of an argument.
Right.
This being a retelling, I'm sure it's accurate to what he felt happened and what his experience has been. So it's just kind of, I think it's important to remember that it's through that lens of, these individuals' experiences of how everything went down.
All right. Shay, how about you? I'm going to be going a lot with you, Shay, because you're in this film industry, kind of. I know you're a movie buff and everything, so yes, you too. But Shay, I want to know with this.
Yeah, no, I think that is a good catch, and I didn't really watch the credits, to be honest. Because
this was right at the beginning.
Did it say it? I might have also been grabbing pasta, so I'm really good at film criticism. Anyway, I think that
sets you all up, and then
I'm like, I was grabbing my dinner, like.
Trying to up you, be like, oh, she's on NPR now too. She's got a thing or two on it. Well, I was making pasta while the first 15 minutes was going.
No, look, the pasta was made. I just was putting it in a bowl and then was like running to the couch with my bowl of pasta. So like I was there. Don't get me
Pasta
wrong.
better
I
been
watched
damn
the
good.
entire thing. It was. Thank you. So anyway, but like I literally was thinking about what to bring in, and that is something I always think about documentaries. Like, you know, when people are like, "Oh my God, I watched this documentary on like why you should go vegan and now I want to go vegan." I'm like, I mean, sure, like that is 100% the truth that this documentary exists in. However, like you do have to understand that there's biases. Like there's no such thing as like completely non-biased. And so knowing that he's an executive producer, definitely, because I thought like, but I did think that overall the documentary did a decent job at making them all very human.
Players Tribune does real well with that.
Yeah. So that's definitely, but now I'm wondering if like there was a little bit more slant. Cause yeah, I did walk away and I was like, wow, he seems really like a cool guy. Like, you know,
Jermaine
like,
O'Neal's a great dude. He really is.
Yeah.
But I didn't quite feel that with the other two. I'm like, oh yeah, like I know about them.
Oh no, yeah, those are guys that are hard knocks kind of guys. And
Right.
Jermaine O'Neal, I think, has kind of went towards a business side since his career has gone on.
And I looked at him on Instagram after, and both of his, I don't know if he has more children, but two of his children are like huge athletes. One of them just won a big award in volleyball, college volleyball, and she is like killing it. And then his son, who's still in high school, is a basketball player. So, you know, he seems to really be investing in them as well.
I feel old knowing that he's got a college-age daughter already.
Right.
Like, this documentary is very special to me because because this is right when I was getting into basketball. So like I was in the 10 feet deep part of the pool with it. So this was a huge thing. Jermaine O'Neal was top 5 favorite player for me. So this was definitely an interesting one. So just starting off with just the building of the team, they get Jermaine O'Neal and Ron Artest through respective trades with Portland Trailblazers and the Chicago Bulls. If you're Reggie Miller in the twilight of your career, would you just like look at Donnie Nelson, the GM, and just be like, what the hell? We were just coming from a title contention and now we're doing this? So Shay, if you were Reggie, how are you going to be reacting to this?
I mean, it's funny because how Reggie would react compared to some of the other players is definitely different. Like literally the whole documentary, like I've always thought Reggie Miller, if he wasn't athletic or good at basketball, he would just be the biggest nerd because he's so sweet. You know, he doesn't say mean things about people. He's kind of
he's one of the worst trash talkers.
I was gonna say.
Oh yeah, no, don't get me wrong. I know.
Trash talkers. Oh my
word. On a different thing that I saw him on top, he was asked who was the worst to rep, and I'm pretty sure he said Reggie Miller.
Yeah, no, I know that, but I'm saying, I guess his like media appearance and like he also seems to be agreeable with like his teams and teammates. You know,
I think he funneled it all into the game.
Yes, exactly.
Not all players are able to do that.
That's how you know a real player.
And so that's why I think Reggie is like, look, like I guess I'll trust it, and it is really disappointing to see. I know we'll get into this, but like just how good that would have been. Like, yeah. So
the Eastern Conference Finals games, as they point out, is kind of one of the biggest catalysts to start this all. You take away that game, which also ended up 66-65. So say what you want about defense, then like
we got to talk about that foul.
Don't worry.
The first time they showed it, okay, I'll wait. I'll save it.
Don't worry. That is.
We'll get into it.
That is a couple questions down. No worries on that one. But take away that Eastern Conference Final series. Are we going to even see something remotely like this, the intensity-wise, Jade?
I don't think so. I think it was going to still have some intensity. I don't think it gets to what it turned into on the floor. And we'll talk about this later too. I'm talking about what happened on the floor before the fans got involved, because it's kind of two separate things that I think a lot of people don't really realize. So we're just talking about what happened on the floor. And yeah, I don't think without that game going that way and ending on that call the way that it did, that there's this much animosity going into that night at the Palace.
Yes.
Yeah.
Seeing how also in that series Detroit just outdogged them, at least like mentally, like both of them were going at it, but at the end of the day, Detroit was older. So they get Steven Jackson, who Captain Jack is right up in that alley. But did Donnie Nelson go too deep with those pit bull like players? Because it worked for the Pistons, but they were veterans.
Right.
With them, Ron Artest was fourth year, maybe fifth year. Jermaine O'Neal was finally coming his own. Captain Jack, Steven Jackson was always a spitfire. Was Donnie Nelson playing too much with fire, Shay?
I think so. And again, because like I know we keep like touching on things that we're gonna get into, but this is a time in the league where there is so much more aggression, and it's not channeled, and there's no protection, like even watching how physical the game is, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like if they did 10% of what these players are doing today, like they would get kicked out of the games, but these guys are doing it every couple seconds. So to have, especially Artest, who is very physical, very, moody on the court. It's just like, I don't think he understood what he was putting together. It was a perfect storm. And if it had gone the way it expected, it would have been beautiful. But because it didn't, that's literally why this happened. It was just like the coming together of personalities, the coming together of, like you said, that catalyst of the year before, the fact that the Pistons are coming in with the ring. Like they're coming in and they're like, we got the chip and y'all didn't. Like that is the kind of mentality that the Pistons are coming in with. And then the Pacers have something to prove to them and be like, yeah, but we added 2 guys and now we're coming for that. So there's so much there. And I think I don't think anyone would have predicted that this was what was going to come out of that.
Yeah, I think it was a kind of a classic example of too much of a good thing. Because,
yeah.
You like to have a guy like that on your team, the really hard-nosed, energetic, hard worker, a little bit scrappy. You need, teams do well when they have one, maybe 2, depending on who the rest of the pieces are. But when those are your 3 of your main guys, like Reggie would be obviously first, but you're talking about your number 2, 3, and 4 guys. Like that's a lot to try and manage for personality wise.
Oh, yes. Like at that point, that job is that coaching is just managing personalities. You're not actually coaching. Right. So, I mean, tip of the hat for Rick Carlisle, because that was the coach for doing that. Because that 03-04 season, they finished 61-21. Like this was before Steven Jackson too. So like think about with that full team with it. Yeah, they should have won. But now getting to that hard foul at the end of the game. So yes, it was a pretty hard foul. End of the game, so it was kind of a cheap foul.
The foul I was talking about first was in the game the previous season.
Oh.
The foul, the flagrant that it ended on, because I watched it the first time and I went, I'd like to see that again. And I watched it a second, on Rick Hamilton. Yeah, on Rick. And then the second time I watched it, I was like, and by the third time, I was like, I would have challenged that if that was the rule.
If it was a rule, yeah.
I think that was a bad call.
It was a bad placement on Ron Artest's forearm, because that's really what it was. If his forearm didn't hit the neck head region on Richard Hamilton, I probably wouldn't have been surprised if they didn't call it. Which I think it's fun too. This was a point in the NBA where they were saying that the league was getting soft. So every 6 years, 7 years, the league is getting soft. When we look at this now, we're like, no, that's just you're punching each other then. And it just keeps on going. I can guarantee you in the mid 2020s, everyone's gonna be like, wow, in 2018, how did they get away with this foul or whatever?
Gosh.
So
I
I'm
don't
curious.
know how much more wiggle room they have to go on that, though.
Yeah. But going on to the Ben Wallace foul, so was his reaction an overreaction, Jade?
I think it was a way overreaction. Like, I understand what he said about how, like, the game was over. There was no reason for him to foul him that hard. Fine.
But this is Big Ben Wallace.
This has been, like, unnecessarily volatile to me in the reaction. Like, he didn't need to come back and shove Ron Artest. That didn't need to happen. And how many games did he get suspended for?
I think it was 15.
Oh, did Ben Wallace get suspended?
Well,
yes.
Yeah, he started
4 Pacers and 5 Pistons.
Oh, I don't think
Ben Wallace started. Like, there was the foul, and the foul probably would have been a flagrant 2, and he probably would have been ejected, but it was the end of the game. If Ben Wallace hadn't reacted the way that he did, I don't think any of the rest of it happens.
That's very true.
And then, but I do also add, so another one of these pit bull players that they had for the Pacers was their starting point guard, Jamal Tinsley. What the hell was he thinking when he told Ron Artest this is his time for the foul, Shay?
Okay, that is, yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, I get it, because again, it's a specific tension, right, that is being brought in from last year. And so the thing is Artest is not the one to do that to you. It's a dare. It is a dare for the freaking daredevil. Like, that guy
cannot control his emotions.
Right. And who is, like, I think it's actually very admirable. Like, one thing that I thought the doc did handle really well is the fact that, like, you know, he was having mental health struggles, but, like, he was also in therapy. He paid for a therapist or a psychiatrist to travel with him. Like,
yes, they had a team one.
Yeah.
Way before it was, like, the norm, which is probably why we're only really hearing about it now.
Because remember when Kevin Love was having anxiety attacks and stuff, and that was, like, mega a couple years ago. Like, that was, like, 5 years ago where, like, so the fact that Artest was also that, you know, with his team knowing, but he's okay. Like, I you know, again, Artest, not my favorite personality, but the fact that he is able to bring in that kind of help and not be ashamed of it, like, to his teammates or whatever, like, that was really admirable for me. And I didn't know that about him. And so still, even with this guy who is attempting to get healthy, attempting to get, you know, some stuff under control, you don't dare him. Like, you don't dare him on something that he's still upset about, you know? Yeah.
And so we're talking about his mental health. He was going through his step process of calming down after the foul. Yes. So before the beer toss and after the foul, did he really do anything wrong? I mean, the table thing could have been taken kind of as like a FU kind of thing, but he was going through his own process, like I said. So he didn't really do too much, did he, Jade?
I didn't think so. He walked away. That was a choice he made to walk away from it. And it was probably a difficult choice because Ben
Wallace is throwing things at him.
Ben Wallace is throwing things. We know that he's already, like, a pretty intense guy. He was a beast. Like, him and Ben Wallace going at it. Ben Wallace is not a given in that fight. I'm just saying.
Right.
You know? So, like, the fact that he chose to walk away, that he was working through, like, he was using his therapy. It wasn't just a thing he said, I have a therapist. It was real.
He's working it. Yeah.
He was working it. And sure, lying down on the table, maybe there's a rule about it on page 687 of the NBA rules. I don't know. But the fact that it was judged that it was some kind of attitude thing or whatever is just like you don't know what's going on in a person's head. To me, the most important part of that was that he walked away. Whatever he does after that, he's not hurting anybody. He's not continuing the confrontation. He walked away. That was the important thing to me of that moment.
Yeah.
And one thing I noticed with him too was when Ben Wallace was throwing things at him, instead of going at Ben Wallace, he pointed at the ref, just being like, check him out.
Handle that.
I was surprised.
Do your job.
I was just because like his mindset at this point, I was thinking he's probably at a blank. His anger and intensity as a full 10. He's probably emotions are nothing in his head.
Right.
So,
he's probably not even able to think yet at that point.
Yeah. So I want to also mention about the palace itself in the security.
Oh.
That was a complete joke. You look back at that now, you have 3 officers in the building upwards to 20,000 people. As the president of the arena, how could you let that happen, Shay?
That's something that, like, obviously this flips, but even in the understanding that these guys are the athletes are some of the strongest, most in shape people in the entire world. I think NBA athletes really, because their height, their strength, their endurance. I mean, basketball is all around sport. And then the fact that a majority of them are way over 6 feet adds a little bit different even if you have a security guard who's like 5'9" and kind of chubby and not very strong, which is kind of what we were seeing. So like, imagine like the scenario that all NBA players that are in a building cause a mutiny and they start going just crazy over each other. They already didn't have enough for that. And I don't want to be like someone who's like, oh, I think worst case scenarios. And maybe things that have happened since then, like, we have had just an uptake in like public violence and attacks, which is really sucky. But it trains you to be more prepared. And we start seeing security guards at places like movie theaters and, different places now. So again, it's like the hindsight of looking back and saying there was like 2 police officers right there. That's it.
Well, I think there's another kind of aspect that really jumped out to me that Jermaine O'Neal said. And what he said was that, like, what most fans don't realize is that we're all mostly friends. So, like, when something goes down on the court and it seems like there's, like, this real animosity because it's team against team, it's probably more like fighting with your sibling.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah.
So, like, if that was really the case, which I buy that 100%, how much security did they think they could need? I suppose. I don't think 3 was enough, but like obviously there was, for whatever reason, they didn't feel like they needed to have more than that. It was a mistake, obviously, and it's not the way things are done now.
But one thing I also thought was funny, at least when they were talking with the security guards, because Reggie Miller's on the court protecting Ron Artest when everything goes down. And then they go up there with the mace at the ready. Cop says, I wasn't going to do it. But then I thought he was funny when he said, I didn't know that it was Reggie Miller with him. I thought it was just an NBA player. And I was like, Reggie Miller is an NBA player, man. That's the other thing. As
he was the
president,
NBA player
do you inform
in
the
that
players?
game.
Do you inform the officers what's going on with the game?
Right.
I talked about that with Pat when we watched it too, because I remember what happened to Masai after Toronto won in Golden State. How do the people whose job it is to maintain order not know who the people of note are while they're working?
Right.
Like, how do you not know who Reggie Miller is?
During the height of his peak of his career.
It was the end of his career because he retired after that season.
But the season, right? And you're like at a game, like you're at the game. You've worked several NBA games. They mentioned
they work 3 games a month.
Yeah, so you've probably seen Reggie Miller in person prior.
But even if you haven't, like, if your job is security, do some prep work. Know who is. Like, at least the notable faces, the team, the coaches, the owners, if they're there, managers. Like, it's not that many people.
It's really
not. Your job is security.
This isn't football. they have huge teams. NBA is what, like
15 on the roster,
right?
5 assistant coach and 4 or 5 assistants, trainers, whatever. You probably don't need to know the trainers.
Right. So like at top, like 25 people that you should at least be kind of familiar with.
Yeah.
At least be able to point out being like, oh, that guy in the suit there is a coach. Like
or owner, or president of the team.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not expecting too many of these rowdy fans being the ones in suits and stuff.
Right.
Which, speaking of rowdy fans, so one of the fans that they interviewed that is one of the more infamous ones that got lit up was Charlie Haddad. He was really playing the victim card here.
He was
so bad.
He came down from several rows up directly onto the court. How much was this situation his fault, Jade?
100%. What are you doing on the court? You're going to square up on Ron Artest? Like, really?
After you just saw what was going on.
Like, obviously he had to have been drunk.
Right.
Oh,
but, like, you chose to drink that much at the game, so it's still your falt. And I disliked him instantly. And before I even knew who he was, because I didn't know who he was a fan.
There like,
I was a fan, I was there. And then you don't find out till like quite a while later that he was involved. He wasn't just a spectator. Which I mean, in hindsight, I probably should have figured that out, but I didn't.
Right.
And then finding out that, and then later on, the prosecutor saying like, he squared up on him with his fists. Ron, he was right. He was in his right to defend himself. I was like, yes.
I loved the part when Reggie Miller said that Jermaine O'Neal had the best miss of his career with that punch. Because I used to give Jermaine O'Neal crap because he slid, but then I look at the video now, I'm like, even though he slipped, that was a huge punch. So I can't even imagine what a full swing from a 6'11", 240-pound athlete would feel like at full swing.
Like that guy could have possibly died.
For sure.
If not had permanent damage. Because again, it's like even if you're drunk, like you should have, like most drunk people have a certain sense of mind not to go into the, I don't know, at least up to the guy who is a lot bigger than you, a lot stronger than you, and was just punching the hell out of another person. Like
in my experience as a bartender, that does not apply to drunk white guys who are too small to defend themselves, because they are always the guys trying to pick a fight.
No, you're not wrong on that.
Like it's always the little white guy.
That's why I'm big.
That's why you're like.
That's why I'm big. So one of the things that I thought was great, though, during the game, though, for one of the refs was Tim Donaghy, the ref that is known forever for fixing games.
Yeah.
I came up with this conspiracy theory. Did Tim Donaghy have anything to do with this game? This was during his days of rigging games. Like, was there anything?
I don't think this game was big enough to matter.
Okay, am I reaching too much, Shay?
Probably. I mean, maybe he paid off that fan to go like, he's like, things are gonna go down. I need you to go up to our test when you know it's time. Like maybe
his teeth looked fake. It was bugging me a lot. His teeth were too perfect.
They were, yeah.
So if you are Reggie Miller and Jermaine O'Neal, you are the team leaders of this Pacers squad. How mad are you at Steven Jackson and Ron Artest, Jade?
Well, we know how mad Jermaine O'Neal was. He didn't make any bones.
He made a whole documentary.
And they made a whole documentary, yes. But also he said that when they got back in the locker room, he went at Ron Artest and they had to be broken up.
Right.
You could hear it from the cameras outside. So, like, he's pretty bad. I think Reggie, even though Reggie is such a class act, I think he probably has the most reason to be mad, but was the least mad. Like he seemed to be the most chill about it even now. And I actually heard him talk about this a few years ago. And at the time, it was like to him, it's like it's something that happened. You wish it didn't. It did, and he's not doesn't seem to be really holding on to it.
Yeah.
But I imagine at the time, and Reggie was right. The team the season before, the defensive team was going to win a championship, and they lost out on their finals chance to Detroit because Ron Artest and Jermaine O'Neal couldn't get on the same page.
Right.
And now, I mean, it's hard because like they did have each other's backs. I don't necessarily agree with that. I'll talk about that later when we talk a little bit more about Mr. Jackson there. I think you got to be pretty upset because they might have won. I think there's a really good chance that if this doesn't happen, Indiana wins a ring that year.
Yeah, it's like 85% sure,
Yeah.
just because like of who ended up going and winning.
They were playing so well.
Do you guys know who won that year?
Who went?
It's the
Pistons.
Spurs and Pistons.
It was Pistons Spurs.
Yeah, and
And Spurs won. It was one of the lowest watched finals in NBA history.
Because they were
before
like
the 80s when they were doing like the pre-recorded games and playing them on. It was one of the worst rated because it was. Watching it was so painfully boring because it was great defense. It was great fundamental ball.
Right. The Spurs were 100% fundamentals. The Pistons were all about defense. There's nothing exciting. There are no fast breaks. There are no dunks. There's nothing exciting.
Because there was also like no athletes in it.
Right.
It was just all good players. But you had the biggest like athlete that was on the court was Tayshaun Prince. Which no knock on him, but like he ain't no high flyer.
Right.
He's a very scrawny person. He was a 3-inch taller version of Reggie Miller.
I was always a big fan of Tayshaun Prince.
Oh, I mean, he was on the Wolves first season. He was great. I mean, sort of. He was great influence for a team.
He was great, sort of.
I mean, yeah. He was only for a season, and he was defensively, it was one of the best lineups we've had in the past 10 years. But then offensively, when he was on the court, we were one of the worst offensive teams in the league. So, but that was much later on in his career. We're going to be staying in this 2004, 2005 time. So, and sorry for this, guys, because there was a lot of notes I took and a lot to it. So get all that. Oh, one last thing for it. So what was more extreme? Seeing Ron Artest go into the stands or that Jermaine O'Neal got hit with a chair, Jade?
Oh.
The chair. Like somebody throws a beer at me and I'm probably going to go in their direction. There's no surprise to me that Ron Artest got hit with a beer and he went to fight. Like, who's surprised about that? I'm not surprised about that. The fact that somebody threw a chair, and it's not even like they're standing 5 feet away with open space between them. No, they're far away from each other. There's an entire crowd in between. He could have hit anybody with the chair.
There's so many people in that area with the way that the mob was coming together that it's like.
It was complete pandemonium. Also, how odd is it of a situation where Rasheed Wallace was the voice of reason for it all? He was in the thick of it all, but if you see it, he's pushing everybody away. Coaches, players, fans.
In your notes, and I immediately started cracking up because I hadn't actually thought about it until I read it, and I was like, "Oh, that's such a good point."
At first, it looks like he's trying to throw a punch in, but space.
He probably led the league in technicals multiple times in his career, I would think. So
he has the record for most in a season.
It doesn't surprise me at all. So yeah, the fact that he was the one that was like, okay, like something has gone terribly, terribly wrong when Rasheed Wallace has to break up the fight.
And so the guy that throws the beer.
I would punch that guy too.
How big of a turd is he, Shay?
So bad. And then the fact that like the newscast of him where he's like basically defending himself and acting like it was no big deal. And then when the guy asked him, like, do you have any remorse for the man that like Artest punched in the face? And he was like, no, I was just happy it wasn't me. I was like, what? Like,
a douche.
How do you have that little compassion? Ugh.
I mean, you're talking about a guy that's willing to throw a partially drunk beer at another human being. He started with a pretty low bar.
That's true.
Turned out to not be the person that was just like, man, I had drunk too much. I was in the moment. It was such a bad idea. No, he's the douche that would do it again.
Yeah. He's like, I'll do it again.
The way I wish the only regret he had is he wished he put out his foot sooner.
Oh my God, I know. Like he kept saying thing after thing after thing that just like Jay said,
incriminating himself.
He was already at a low point, and then he just like basically went all the way down to like hell. And like,
what super annoys me about that situation has to do a lot with the media, because I grew up an hour from Detroit. I was still living. I had moved away already, but like I was still following the Pistons. I followed all of this.
Right.
I didn't see that guy until the documentary and all the coverage that I watched.
Right.
And if that interview had been aired at the time, I know we're going to talk about how the media covered it, but it was so lopsided.
So
bad.
Going with, now we're going to shift over to the media coverage of it, because it was real lopsided until pretty much now that we're hearing the players' side of it now, 17 years after the fact. So after you just overall, we're going to look at it. Do you agree with the suspensions, Shay?
No, because they never got to tell their side of the story. I think it would have been different, because the thing is I think that Stern felt that because of the way that the narrative was out, that he had to make a very strong, like, no tolerance stance on this and give them the harshest punishments possible. But with the edited footage, was seeing the way, because again, this started as like a thing on the court, right? And then the fans got involved, and then it became an angry mob going after the Pacers. And so when you understand it like that, you know why. Yes, there was obviously, like some stuff going on where like Artest, I guess, like didn't need to necessarily like run up and punch people, but also they should have been throwing beer. Like there's, you know what I mean? And that kind of stuff.
That's assault.
Like,
and that's what he got charged with.
And yeah. And so like the way that, and then when they're leaving, the way that they're still continuing to like punch and like not care, throw food. Yeah, that to me is so despicable, and it shows like how misunderstood their story has been. Because yes, they had adrenaline running from the game, so yes, they made some decisions that I wouldn't necessarily have made. But also, I've never been in an angry mob of over like thousands and thousands. Like, what did they say? It was like, I mean, some people had left, but it was like still like 10,000 people there.
Yeah, how can you have 10 to 12,000 people versus 15 players?
And you can't expect those 15 players to keep a cool head in that situation. Like, they're people. That's an unreasonable expectation. Should they have repercussions? Right. Should there have been repercussions? Absolutely.
Right.
I would never say otherwise. But the thing that got me was when Jermaine O'Neal said they didn't even talk to us before they decided on the suspensions 2 days later. And I thought, at least the league has progressed in that way. Because we know now that when stuff happens, they talk to everybody before they start handing out punishments.
Like there should have been a full investigation, not just a...
Right. And the thing that jumps out to me with that is a couple seasons ago when Joel Embiid and Kat got into it, and there was that kerfuffle and Ben Simmons was right there and then didn't end up getting fined. Because if you watched it live, it looks like Ben Simmons was like part of everything.
Right.
But he didn't get fined because they spoke to everybody and everybody said, no, he was a peacemaker. Despite what it looks like, this is what happened. Like, you have to have that. You can't just... You took away an entire season from Ron Artest in his prime. You took away 25 games from Jermaine O'Neal, up and coming. You took away 20, I think, from... 25 from Jackson. Like, you gotta talk to people before you do stuff like that.
It's league altering what happened. It was league altering. It wasn't just the team. It was the league itself, considering the Pacers were a top 3 team in the league at the time.
Well, and then that's why it's not surprising to know that, like, this was so season altering too, like, you know, because it's altering on every level, but specifically for the rest of the season, that, like, it's not surprising that it was one of the lowest watched finals, because it's like, at that point, why do you want, like, you already know that that's not who's supposed to be there. We've had other stuff go on this season. We don't get to see the potential.
They compromise the integrity of the playoffs.
And
yes.
I'm sure that that's also a key factor why the ratings were so low, was no one, as they kept on throwing the word around, no one wanted to support a thug league.
Oh my.
It made my skin crawl every time somebody said that, because I'm just like, white person.
I was going to say, that's such a white person word.
White chicks, like...
I did look up, a lot of it was Fox News.
Of course
that they pulled out.
Of course it was.
There was some MSNBC, so like when you ever saw Stephen A. Smith or Michael Wilbon, that was from some other stuff, which I thought was funny. This was before both of those guys were with ESPN officially.
Right.
Stephen A. Smith was still in Philadelphia.
We don't claim Stephen A. Smith.
But like you said, I did see that Philly byline there, so I was like,
so if with getting the suspensions, if David Stern wasn't so much backed in a corner with how he laid down the suspensions, would we have seen as big of suspensions, Jade?
Well, I'll answer your question first. I think no. I think the idea that David Stern was backed into a corner is, like, don't get me wrong, David Stern did a lot of great stuff for the NBA. Right. Nobody is disputing that. I think he screwed up here. I think this is one of the clear times where he did not handle the thing the way it needed to be handled.
He was judge, jury, and executioner.
He was judge, like, no.
When he said he was the only one that voted for it, I was like, you can't do that.
You can't, like,
you can't do
that. Wasn't a red flag? Like,
that's not an executive order. You can't do that.
There should have been suspensions. There should have been stuff, whatever, like, for sure, whatever. But, like, the NBA, and they've come a long way with this, no question about it. But the NBA should not make disciplinary decisions based on a media narrative.
Oh, yeah.
Like, your players are your product. You protect your players. Even if you want to leave out that they're people and they have families and they have feelings, even if you want to leave that out from a 100% business standpoint, you protect your product, which means you have a conversation about a situation like this with the people who were involved. And the fact that so much of that footage was not aired on all of the media coverage, like, it was very conveniently edited, as many things often are.
Yep.
And, like, I can't imagine being those guys and seeing the footage that gets played and thinking, well, what about that? And what about that? I didn't know about the chair till now. I didn't know about that.
I vaguely remember the chair. I remember the reaction, but I don't completely remember the chair. So, yeah, that was something that they always seem to forget about. Surprise.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, I just, like, it reminds me of when I was in food service, and one of my favorite managers I ever had. He was the kind of person that, to a customer's face, like if they were like talking badly or being mean to a server, a bartender, he would like defend us 100%, even if we were in the wrong at times. And then he would reprimand us behind closed doors. You know, like then he would pull us in the kitchen and be like, no, this was kind of on you, but I'm on your team. So like that's what David Stern should have done. It's like he had a choice in the fact that, like, yeah, he was technically backed into a corner, but you can also, as the president of an entire sports league, be like, look, I know this is the way it looks, but these guys are good guys. Like, you know, they are hard workers. They are like, you know, whatever, fill in the blank. He could have made up stuff he didn't even believe in, like Jade said, to protect that. But to submit to the media and the fans' pressure, it just shows that, like, one of the reasons that I'm such a big advocate for the players, when they do things like mental health days or whatever, like, I kind of understand why a little bit more, because I also get that, like, Stern had to kind of play into what the fans were doing, because you also, that's who pays your bills. But at the same time, your players are who play. So, like, you have to find that balance. And if you can't find the balance on the fly like that, then, you know, you're probably going to make the wrong decision, as I totally agree with Jade. Stern definitely did here.
It's better to take longer to make the right decision. Those guys could have sat out whatever games, and those games could have been added to whatever suspension they decided on later.
Yep.
And taken longer to really look at the thing and make sure that the things were fair. Like I
5 days instead of 3.
Like, is going in the stands a reason to lose an entire season? I think it was too much.
Yeah.
Speaking of talking with the players and figuring out their side of the story, in the documentary, they had Jim Gray, who was the on-the-court reporter for the game. How key was it, Shay, for them to get him there for the interview, since he was there on the court as everything was happening?
I think it was really important because you have someone who's a little less biased, right? Because the other people that are in it, you have the refs, who we literally have a ref that we know was like fixing games. So like that's something. And then you have the Pistons and you have the Pacers. So there's going to be some bias in there. And then you have the fans who come onto the court, which obviously had some bias because they...
Detroit Superfan?
Yeah. And then they were coming onto the court. Like, again, not in your right mind when you do that. There's a good chance they weren't in their right mind, but he is there as like a reporter. And while usually what he's like journalizing, which is not a word, but I just made it a verb, is like a really cool dunk, it's still like your job as a reporter to take in everything that is going on. And he was able to do that. And really, like, his retelling of it is still so important to this, because he doesn't really have that emotion attached in the same way that these other guys might still have some bitterness or some sadness about the fact that they were suspended, you know, or completely altered. Reggie doesn't have a ring, and it's because of this. I mean, the ripple effect of Malice at the Palace cost a lot of things for many, many people. And so the fact that he's able to come in as an outsider, not an NBA player, not attached to any team, and kind of talk about it and have as much empathy as he does for the players as well is like, I don't know, that was really touching to me. I just thought he like seemed like a really cool guy too. Like, you're like the old school reporters.
No, Jim Gray is he was one of my favorite sideline reporters. I don't know if he still does it, because if he did, it would do it to ESPN.
You know what I forgot to mention about, I keep forgetting his first name, Jackson. What's his first name?
Steven.
Yeah.
His brother's name. I don't know why I can't remember it. Anyways, Steven Jackson, one of the things with him that I was just like, oh, dude, was when he was like, listen, I was there for my brothers. And it's just like, sometimes being there is de-escalating things, not throwing punches.
Right.
You know, and he seemed like just so one note to me that like that was the only thing that mattered, that I came through in it. And I think that is part of why that thug mentality thing was so easy to, because it's a very gang based mentality that,
right.
you know, if your homies are throwing down, you're going to throw down too. You don't think about how do I get them out of this.
Right. You're not trying to separate.
Right.
You're joining in.
And so I just, that was something that stuck out to me, because I was like, you know, being there for people isn't always about engaging with them in what they're doing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just when he was walking out, say, "We ride together, fam," I was like,
oh my gosh.
Oh, Forrest, man. Oh, we get it. You're tough.
Yeah.
You just knocked out some people. You're shirtless. You're going in the locker room. We get it. You made your point, man. We ride together. Because of how Stern was reacting very hard on the players and very little on the fans, is that why maybe Adam Silver has now shifted the league to a much more player-oriented league? It's like you mentioned, Jade, you got to protect the player. You got to protect the product. So is that why? Because he also worked underneath Stern for 25 plus years. So does he have a little bit more of an idea on how to manage something like this now?
Yeah, I think so. That's a really interesting question. If I ever get a chance to talk to Adam Silver, that's a question I would ask him. Like, what about you as a commissioner did you take away from being involved in that under Stern at the time? Because there's no way it didn't affect the way he does his job.
Oh,
something like that.
Yeah.
And between that and the fact that the league just was always going to move towards more player empowerment, the combination of things, I think we're seeing a lot more balance between things. There have been incidents over the last few seasons. A season ticket holder or a part owner of the Warriors tried to punch Kyle Lowry during the 2019 finals. Westbrook's had stuff lately. There have been a couple other players, and the league is handling it well. In fairness, the players also handled it well.
Right.
They didn't throw punches. They didn't, they went to the refs to be like, handle that. But I think that has to do with the growth of the league as well. Like, the league does a much better job of preparing players to be players than they used to. It used to be you got drafted, you showed up somewhere, whatever team it was, and you were an NBA player. Now we've got Summer League, we've got G League, we've got, even the way they did the draft this year, I was like, this is the NBA. They're getting the players ready on draft night for the publicity and the interviews and showing all their fits, and like, they're actually, as soon as you're in, and we're going to prepare you for all of this. So I think it's a combination of those three things: the league preparing players better, whatever Adam Silver learned from the Malice at the Palace thing, and the player empowerment have all come together to make sure that this is not a thing that's ever going to happen again.
Why? One of the last things I was always curious about was how come it took so long for the media to put any of the responsibility or the blame onto the fans, Shay?
I think just narratives that are like, well, there's a couple of things actually. I was thinking last night about how this is a time when, I know, was it Jermaine who said that his phone kept going off? But we have to remember, like, in 2004, that's a phone that like barely gets texts. Like, you're paying
a good package
for sure,
and you're paying
for 9.
Yeah, or you have to call at certain times. Like, so this isn't a time where like social media is also influencing. So today, when narratives are being set by the media, you have everyone else's interpretation of it. This is during a time where the media is really your only place that you do get news, interpretation, first looks at things, video, evidence, stuff like that. So I think that really put a hold on the NBA. The NBA also, I mean, if you think about it, this is post Jordan. You know, this is a post Jordan NBA. There's a certain reclaiming of a Black urbanization, and the way that looks in that time is, I mean, you think about it, even in the last year, we've seen the way that the NBA has stepped up to support the majority of its players because they are Black. It is a majority Black league. It's been a majority Black league for a very long time. Yet the media at this time in 2004 is majority white. It's very racist. We're going through a very weird time culturally for this, and there's not a lot of support coming from a Black female sideline reporter who's like, hey, no, like, look, you know. And so the fact that we do have the coaches and the sideline reporter and other white men who are like, no, we were there, we know that this was the fans, it also shows that even their voices were being overpowered by the media. The media really, really set this rhetoric of thugs and thugginess, and the fact that it was in as many headlines as it was. I mean, I literally cringed when I heard that it was like the table of white women who were like, when they were making fun of Artest when he changed his name, like, and then they were like, oh, like Prince doing that symbol, that didn't last for long. And I was just like, first off, why would you make fun of Prince? Like,
yeah, why are you going at Prince?
Like,
national treasure.
You?
Also, we don't know your names, and Prince has revolutionized music, so that's a whole nother story. But also, like, it's someone's choice if he wants to change his name. Like, do I find
a name?
It's literally a name.
Well, and that's the thing. To them, it's just a name. To him, it meant something.
It meant something.
It meant something to his growth as an individual. It meant a lot of things. Like, I get this. My legal name is not Jade.
Right.
I changed my name because
it's Rebecca.
No. But, you know, I went through some stuff growing up, and I decided that using that name would not allow me to let go of it in a way that could let me be happy. So I stopped using it as my name.
Yeah.
So, like, people need to understand that, like, and because it's a name that meta world peace, like, yeah, it sounds odd, sure.
But to him,
it's his right to change
his
name.
If we're going to be looking at names, okay, we got Muggsy Bogues. That's not his name.
No.
We have World Be Free in the 90s. I mean, 80s. We have Fat Lever in the 80s and 90s. Like, why are we going at names with it? That's when you know you're reaching for a story.
Yes.
When you're going at a name. That's when I also say when people go at players like hairline, that's when you know you don't have a story. You don't have a joke. Is when you go at something that's superficial.
To Shay's point about social media, I remember thinking while I was watching it, no wonder the NBA players embrace social media so much.
That was my next question, actually.
No wonder. Like, it must have been a godsend for them to be like, hey, we can tell our own story.
Right.
It doesn't have to be filtered through all these networks who, by the way, newscasts compete for ratings. Can we remember this? They're competing for ratings. They are not trying to give you the best news, the most accurate information. Journalism isn't really like that anymore.
No.
Like mainstream journalism.
And especially sports journalism has been this kind of commercial for a long time. So by 2004, it's definitely commercial. Like,
yeah. So, like, no wonder the NBA is the biggest sport for Twitter. Like, it doesn't surprise me at all. Why wouldn't they embrace the thing where they get to go, oh, this is what they're saying? How about I get to have my say too? At
I'll
least
tell
we can
my
hear
story.
both sides of the story and draw our own conclusions.
So, and building off with that social media idea, how much quicker would have this investigation gone with social media? Because
So
this
much.
was a lot of time and waste of money for the Supreme Court.
So much. And
So
I
much.
really appreciated that the prosecutor said that. Like, there are
Yeah.
murders we're not investigating. There are all these other things we're not investigating because we have to go through all this nonsense.
It is nonsense. It is, and like, don't get me wrong, I am happy that, like, again, that the prosecutor even to this day can be like, no, that was assault by throwing beer across and hitting someone. Like, I'm happy that that can be said, because I think a lot of times, again, because of the way that the rhetoric has been, is this idea that they overreacted.
Mm-hmm.
No, and even if they did overreact, something, again, like, I'm always really proud when players, again, like nowadays, when they have fans that come up to them, and Russell Westbrook had that angry fan come up to him, and he literally was like, yeah, and push him, and he was like, you need to get away, because he's angry. He has adrenaline like we have no idea running through him. That is something that the NBA players, that they love that. That's why they keep playing this game, and they keep pushing themselves to succeed and succeed. But fans that don't understand and try to take that for granted, I'm sorry, like, you can't go up to someone as aggressive as Russell Westbrook or Ron Artest and act like you're gonna punch them, because, like, you're dealing with a whole different, like, sense of mentality, a whole different strength. And so I was happy that, you had this prosecutor who was like, no, like, he had every right to hit that guy who came at him with his hand in a fist. Like, things like that are good for reclaiming the narrative. But I think that this story would have been set straight. It would have challenged a media narrative of thugginess much quicker. And honestly, I almost wonder too if the suspensions would have been different if we didn't,
Well, I was going to mention, because Jermaine O'Neal said, nobody cares that I appealed my suspension.
Right.
And it didn't end up being all the games that were just, I didn't know that until I watched the documentary.
I didn't know that either.
But if we had had social media, that would have been all over Twitter. We would have known,
Right.
He appealed it. He's not going to be suspended for all the games that, David Stern initially said. That's important. That's part of the story.
Because he
Very
appealed
important.
it and won. Like, that's huge. That is huge.
Very key with that one. What was? I had one thing that I was gonna mention. Son of a
Nutcracker.
Nutcrackers indeed. So Reggie Miller already had a chance at a finals a couple times throughout his career. This was pretty much Jermaine O'Neal's real chance at a title when the rest of his career went on. So at the end of it all, who got the shortest end of the stick? Reggie Miller or Jermaine O'Neal, Jade?
I think Jermaine O'Neal. Because even though Reggie didn't get his ring, we know who Reggie Miller is. We love Reggie Miller. We know he's one of the best to ever play the game. This completely derailed Jermaine O'Neal's career.
Yep, it did.
It completely. And Ron Artest said, like, he feels remorse for it. He's like, he was on the way to being one of the best players in the world.
He was the baby Garnett.
So, like, for sure, I think it was the owner or the manager, whoever was asked that question in the documentary too.
Donnie Nelson.
Donnie Nelson, yes. And he said Jermaine O'Neal as well. I think it's really hard to argue with that.
It's because, again, like you stated, like, we know who Reggie Miller is. Like, he's one of the guys, like, all-time greats that doesn't have a ring. We know that. But,
with one team.
Right. With one team. He was an...
I think that might be the truest loyalty.
And didn't he even go to University of Indiana? Like,
No. He was all LA. So then when he went to Indiana, it was like, where am I going?
And then he stayed. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
He breathes Indiana basketball now. Like he said when he was his last game, I am a Pacer and a Hoosier. which that is huge for Indiana people. If you say you're a Hoosier,
That's big.
You're in with the basketball crowd with
I mean, if you really love basketball the way you know Reggie Miller does, Indiana's a pretty great place to land.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So just now to wrap this one up, will this ever not be brought up, Jade?
I don't think so. I laughed at Steven Jackson saying, "Listen, get this on camera. Never ask me about this again."
Oh my gosh.
Oh, how he just went off on it, and I'm sure, and I felt him there. I felt him 100%.
Because you know, for all these years, that's the only thing he's remembered for as an NBA player is that night at the Palace of Auburn Hills.
And he's had some memorable seasons and moments in his career. He's a champion. The Warriors team that took out the #1 ranked Dallas team that year. Like, he was key for a lot of teams. So, Shay, what about you? Will this ever not be brought up?
No, and I think the key part is I might have been O'Neal who said it, but there's kids who mention it to me that weren't even born.
Yeah,
and the fact that that's the legacy it has, because I know of some things, right? Like, you talk about things that just some things.
I wish I knew things.
Like, think about pop culture moments that you bring up to some people who are like, I don't know what you're talking about. And you bring up Malice at the Palace to a lot of people, they know about it. Especially if you're into sports. Like, any sports fan, doesn't matter if they were born and are literally 9 or 10 years old. It's like a lesson that their parent will tell them is be like, oh, there was this one night in Detroit. Like, you know what I mean? It's a moment. And so that's why I don't think this will ever die. Yeah. Because Anthony was mentioning, I think he mentioned it to his Spanish tutor who lives in Mexico, and he's like, oh, brawls break out all the time, that's not news. And it's like, the difference is that it was fans and players, which again, we have gone over. We think the fans literally attacked, and there is moments, especially in soccer worldwide, where things are thrown at the players for losing and that kind of thing.
In stands.
Yeah. But it's usually fan on fan.
Football fans have riots after games.
Well, you don't want to be
after wins.
You don't want to be like Yankees Boston. That's where brawls break out. But Malice at the Palace was very, very specific. It's not comparable to any of that. And I think because of just the magnitude and then the way that it changed the league. And then again, who got blamed for it for so long? That's such a dynamic situation in general that it's a real moment to learn about. And I think it'll continue to be passed down to generations and generations.
All right. And this is not a fast break question, but I just want a quick take. What among NBA fans, what is more memorable? The brawl or Michael Jordan? Jade?
What about Michael Jordan?
Just in general?
Just because he was the face of it all, but everyone always mentions the brawl.
That's true.
Because
I think it's the brawl. Because it's such an outlier of an event. Right? So many things had to happen for that to be able to unfold.
Right. To that magnitude, too.
Yeah.
What about you, Shay?
I'm going to say Jordan, but I'm going to say the fact that I had to think about that shows the difference between a man's entire career in a league versus a 10-minute situation. That's pretty big.
I might have to side with Jade on this just because negative stuff always gets the brighter light.
Yep.
True.
No matter how much... Yeah. Even with Jordan, as the years have come on, he's one of the greatest players of all time, if not the greatest. But now, because of The Last Dance and everything that's come up, now a lot of things is focused on the guy's kind of a turd.
He is.
He is a turd. So like now his entire narrative of him being like a superhero for it's like, and this, yeah, I mean, I guess.
Basketball, you were kind of a garbage human being. That
Yep.
matters now. It didn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to some people. It didn't matter at all in sports at the time.
Yep. Okay. Well, I had fun with breaking this down today. This was when this documentary came out. This brought up a lot of nostalgia for me. I hope I didn't talk too much today because I could have
No, it was great
done the whole
things.
episode myself on this. So
we should do that. No.
And there's just flies everywhere right now. I got 5 flies flying around me at my cabin right now. It is ridiculous.
Summertime.
It is. Okay, so, but now it is time for the fast break where I have 3 questions that Shay and Jade have no knowledge of, and I want to hear their answers or their takes with it. Okay, so first question. So one of the things that I noticed that I really liked with the documentary, like at the beginning, it had like one of those big box TVs on the court, but then it also had the score and the time left on the shot on the scoreboard behind it.
Yeah.
What was the point differential? I will give you a heads up. I will give you a heads up. It's in the teens. And this is what 45.9 seconds left in the game.
Over.
Or by the time when the fight broke out, it was 45.9 seconds. And it's in the teen.
Gonna say it was 14 points.
Shay?
15.
It is 15. It was 97 to 82.
I was originally going to say 14, so that's why I just went one.
This was a moment where I thought of, why are all the starters in anyways?
Seriously.
Oh, that's so true.
Why are the starters
all those guys should have been on the bench. Ben Wallace should have been on the bench.
Ron Artest, Tinsley, Steven Jackson.
They all should have been on the bench.
All of them. Okay, so how many games were suspended between the 4 Pacers and the 5 Pistons? And it is over 100
It's
games.
for sure over 100.
And then a side note, it equaled out to over $10.4 million in fines.
Fines only? Is that including their lost income from the games, or that's just fines?
That I just saw fines and stuff, so I didn't know if it was lost income too.
Okay.
But this also has to, I think it also went through the franchises. I think it also included people, like the fans that were involved too, that were actually convicted. Right. Gosh, I wonder how many more convictions they would have had with social media.
A lot more.
Right. So
I'm going to say it was 143 games.
Shay?
124.
Jade, good guess. 146 games.
Whoa!
146
the price
games.
is right.
Well, when you think of it, there was still 73 games left of the season at that point. The Pacers were going in 7-2. And at full cylinder. So just that alone for Ron Artest, he's got half of it.
Right.
He's got half of it. So, and last question, I want to keep it with the theme of the brawl, the teams and stuff with it. So the Pacers getting hit real hard, obviously, with suspensions and everything. What seed did the Pacers finish off at the end of the season? Shay.
6th. I don't know. I meant
Jake?
to look it up last night too.
10th.
6th.
Really?
They ended up with a 44-38 record.
They still made the playoffs.
That's
Think
so
how great they would have been.
I know.
Full team all year.
Reggie wouldn't have retired. He would have signed another year and ran it back.
Yeah.
Did you guys know that the 08 or the 07-08 Boston Celtics tried to get Reggie out of retirement because they needed some three-point shooting?
No way.
I'm so glad he never played for Boston.
Oh, no, he turned it down.
The biggest thought in my mind is I'm so glad I never had to see Reggie Miller in a Boston uniform.
Right. I'm curious on how much Reggie Miller was holding back in this interview.
I don't think he was.
I know. You don't think so?
You don't think so?
I've seen him talk about Malice at the Palace before in an interview that just he was in, and he told pretty much the exact same story. And like I said, I think he's been at peace with it for a long time.
He was also already very mature as an adult.
Yeah.
Right.
As a man himself.
He was the veteran. Like, he'd been around the league already, you know?
Yeah, when this happened, it was last season. So year 18 in the league.
Yeah.
He'd been playing basketball professionally almost longer than he'd been alive.
And like, I think if you're Reggie Miller, you have to decide. I can't think about what if, because why would you want to do that to yourself?
Right.
Yeah. That is very true. Well, this has been fun.
Yeah.
Documentary. I gave it a 10 out of 10. I'm looking forward to more of the Untold documentaries coming out because it is made by the Players Tribune, and they do, as we just witnessed, they do a phenomenal job at getting another side of the story that we would have never known. Now let's see if Ben Wallace makes his own documentary out.
Yeah. Probably will. No.
Well, on that note, we aren't going to be throwing any beers and causing any issues. We're just going to be saying goodbye on this today. It's been great. See you later, everyone.